All right, so why don't we go ahead and get started? It's 6:07, and we have everybody in present. So thanks everyone for joining. So I'll go ahead and call the Halifax Finance Committee meeting to order at 6:07 p.m. Today is Wednesday, May 8th, 2024. This meeting is being conducted remotely and recorded by Area 58. In attendance from the Halifax Finance Committee is Michael Bennett, Frank Johnston, Jim Walters, Bill Smith, Cheryl Zorla Burke, EJ Bryan, and myself, Todd Dargy. So first order of business, as always, is the acceptance of the meeting minutes. So we actually have two separate minutes to approve. So one was the April 22nd, which I know was distributed, and I think everyone said that they had a chance to review on the last meeting. So I just want to reconfirm everybody's had a chance to review those. No questions, concerns, or comments on the April 22nd minutes?
Nope.
No? Right. Everybody good there?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay. All right. And then the second instance was the Monday, April 29th minutes. Has everyone had a chance to review those? Any questions, comments, concerns on those?
Mm-mm.
No. Okay. All right. Hearing none, then I guess would somebody like to make a motion to approve the minutes of April 22nd and of April 29th?
I move for both.
Thank you, Michael.
Second.
Thank you, Cheryl. Roll call vote, Frank?
Yes, on the minutes for April 22nd and April 29th.
Thank you, Frank. Jim?
Yes on approval of minutes.
No.
Yes.
EJ?
Yes.
Cheryl?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
And I am a yes as well. Motion carries 7-0. All right, so next up, without further ado, is Mr. Seelig has so graciously joined us here tonight to kind of take us through article number 9, which is the last remaining budget for the FinCom to vote, either to recommend or to not recommend. So Jonathan will take us through the details of that and certainly answer any questions that anyone may have. So with that being said, I guess, Jonathan, I'll turn it over to you if you're ready to go.
Awesome. Thanks, Todd. Yeah, and I think I've told you guys just a little bit about the history with me and CPA. About 10 years now, I started looking into raising money for our playground for the Friends of Hops. And communities I spoke with would say, well, just use your CPA money. And what's CPA? What's that? So in investigating it, I found out that it's a state program that helps with projects similar to Hops. But unfortunately, we are one of the only communities in the greater area that wasn't a part of it. So since that day, it was something that I was very, very interested in bringing to Halifax. And that's kind of how the ball started here. So I'm going to start, bear with me there. I'm going to try and share my screen. I don't know if that'll work here. Do you need to give me access to this at all, or?
Nope, there you are. We're looking at your screen.
You're looking at me now? All right, cool. Can you hear me now? Good. All right.
Yep.
So let's go over here. And this is a presentation that I'm going to be making at the town meeting Monday. So I think I told you guys if there's anything that doesn't make sense or you need more information, let me know. And if I can't get it to you tonight, I will make sure that I bring it to your attention on Monday. All right, everybody with me?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. All right, so Community Preservation Act, essentially, it is what it is. You are trying to preserve your community. So as you can see here, it's investing together in the future of Halifax. What is the Community Preservation Act? The CPA. So the CPA allows communities to establish a fund that is specifically dedicated to these 4 things. It's historic preservation, it's open space, it's recreation, and it's affordable housing. So those are kind of the 4. I talk about buckets a lot. Those are kind of the 4 buckets that you put this funding into. Okay. So next question, I guess, is where does the money come from? So the funds are collected as a part of an annual surcharge, anywhere from 1 to 3% to your local property taxes. So what we're proposing here in the town of Halifax is a 1.5% surcharge for the average Halifax resident, the average assessed home value. That is about $84 a year. What we're going to do to try to soften the blow for some folks, we're going to include 3 exemptions that help with kind of offsetting things for folks that need it. First of all, everybody in Halifax will get a $100,000 decrease off their assessed property value. And I can show you in the next slide what that means. We'll also have exemptions for qualified owners that are low-income housing, as well as low-income to moderate-income senior housing. So again, the idea there, try to help folks that might struggle the most with this new program. So the other thing too is that if the taxpayer is receiving a regular property abatement on taxes or exemption, they're going to get a prorated reduction in the surcharge as well. Okay, so I know that was a lot, but I think this next slide might help explain it a little bit. So we're going to do some math here. So let's look at over on the left side there, the sample tax bill without CPA. You'll see there in column A, or I guess row A, your average single family home. According to the town, the average value is $491,227. Our tax rate for this coming year is 14.40 per thousand. So you do some quick math. Your tax bill for the average homeowner in Halifax, $7,073. Now, let's see what it looks like if we do this CPA program. So you take that 491,227 and you take off your residential exemption, which is in row D, as in dog there, your 100,000. So your new assessed value, instead of the 491, it drops down to 391,227. All right. So your new tax basis using that 14.4 is 5,633 as the basis. So 1.5% is the surcharge we're looking to set. Each taxpayer on average would pay about $84.50. So if we do enact this program, you're not seeing a super high jump in your taxes. You're going from a tax bill without CPA to $7,073. If we did do this CPA program, it's $7,157.50. So I put there on the bottom line, it essentially breaks down to $1.63 a week for this program. So any questions on that? I admit I'm not a mathematician. Does that make sense to everybody there?
Yeah.
Jonathan, are those exemptions specific to Halifax or are they standard for the program?
So they set it per town, EJ. And actually, I'm going to write that down. They have certain low income levels and senior income levels per town, and that's something that I should include in the presentation. So I will look and have that for Monday to see what. Are you asking like what level they set it at, as far as low income?
Well, yeah, and I also want to see if I'm just curious. What's that?
Just a type as well, like the various exceptions.
Correct.
Yeah.
One more time. One more time.
So just is it standardized as far as what exemptions are?
Yeah. So as part of the CPA, this is spreading across the state. I will admit that those 3 exemptions we're using are by far and away a commonality across most of the communities that do this program. Almost all of them enact those 3 exemptions: the 100,000 for business, the 100,000 for residential, and then the possibility for abatement for low income and low to moderate senior income. So those those are nothing we said here in Halifax. We're just kind of following the lead of the CPA program that they do in other communities.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Any other questions before I go to the next?
Jonathan?
Yeah.
So at $84.50, what would the amount received annually be for this program?
Oh, great minds think alike there, Johnston. Hold on one second.
Well, hey, John, before you change it,
sure.
I would just recommend that you change your bottom line to 23 cents a day.
You like that one? Okay.
Yeah. You want to reduce it to the ridiculous if you're going to sell.
I love it. You know what, Jim? That's a fantastic idea. Fantastic idea. Yep, I'm going to do that. 23 cents a day. So less than a quarter a day. I love it. Okay. So I'm going to go to the next one here. So let's do some more math. As Frank just predicted, how much are we going to collect? So we have roughly 28,000 tax bills in Halifax. Average tax bill, we're pulling in about $85 per bill, even with the exemptions. So our estimated available annually for investment projects is $238,000. But again, the beauty of this is that does not include the state match. That is just money that we ourselves in Halifax would raise for any of those projects in those 4 buckets. All right, does that make sense so far?
Mhm.
Okay, so we're going to go to the next here. Let's take a look at who's on board. So this is a map of the state of Massachusetts. And of the 351 communities in the state, 196 participate in this program. That's 54% of the state. You have cities like Boston, you're down the Cape and the Islands, you're in the south coast of Fall River, you're north like Peabody, you're out west in Springfield and Stockbridge, and you're also in central Mass in the Worcester area. I don't like how they did this map. For some reason, they put the orange. They essentially mean the same thing. The only reason it's orange is their cities. So I know the orange and the green might be a little confusing, but the only reason that they're yellow or orange, whatever color that is because they're designated as a city that's participating.
Yeah.
So it looks a little confusing in my opinion, but I kind of cleaned it up. And I think this is the big slide that I really want to drive home with folks. So I zoomed in on southeastern Massachusetts and take a look. Here are our Community Preservation Act committees. Communities. And those are the ones in green that participate in the program. You can see there, yellow, Old Halifax. It's basically us, East Bridgewater, Brockton, and Avon. And that's essentially it in this area.
Wow.
So to me, that speaks to how popular this program is and how effective this program is, that we unfortunately are very late to this game. But yeah, I really think this slide really sends the message what we've actually been missing out on here. So you can see the communities. I just listed a bunch there on the side there, but both Silver Lake communities of Kingston and Plimpton have been doing this. Pembroke, almost all of our local areas here have been part of the CPA for quite some time. So, I felt it's time that we finally hopped on board here. All right. So again, to kind of, go ahead. Question.
What percent does the state match?
So we'll get to that, Jim, in 1 second.
Okay.
But it depends on how much money they generate. So I guess I can get into it now. So essentially, every real estate transaction that happens in the state, people are hit with a surcharge, and that surcharge goes to the Community Preservation Act. I think it's $50. I don't know if Cody's on; he might be able to help me out, but it's $50 per deed, I think. I don't have the exact numbers on that, but essentially it's the bigger and the busier the real estate market, the more funds that are generated for this program. And I will admit, even though I'm a supporter, the real estate market has been a little slow lately. So the money, this year hasn't been as great as it's been in years past, but that doesn't mean things could change, so just because the real estate market might be a little bit slower now doesn't mean things could change down the road. And I would hate to not jump in just because of a 1-year situation. So,
Jonathan, I just had a quick question as far as us kind of being late to the game and just adopting this now, as well as the neighboring towns that haven't adopted it, I guess. Is there any reason why we haven't, I guess, or is it just that we weren't aware of the program, or is there any concerns or? So we tried. I spoke with our old town administrator. We tried, I want to say maybe 15 years ago. And it didn't, what was it?
2007.
All right. So not 15, 17 years ago. And it just didn't, unfortunately, guys, especially here in Halifax, when folks hear surcharge and folks hear, a bigger, a slightly bigger increase in their tax bill, they don't want to hear it. So it didn't get any traction the last time they tried.
Sure.
But I still think it's worthwhile to check out. So we'll get into the reasons there.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
You guys ready for the next one?
Let's do it.
All right. So again, to drive home the idea of how much money our communities have been taking in, there's a list there on the left-hand side of some of our local neighbors that have been part of this program. I've listed their surcharge level because, again, each town can set it between 1% to 3%. Mm-hmm. The next column is what the state has given for 2024. This doesn't include the money that the town itself has raised. This is just state money on top of the town money that they've generated. And then on the far right, that is the amount of state money. Again, no town money on this slide. It's all state money that these towns have pulled in since the inception of the program. So, I mean, as you can see, Hanover with almost $7 million, Plimpton, with almost 400,000. So unfortunately, we've missed the boat on a lot of it, but it still doesn't mean I don't think we should jump on board. So
Yeah.
wanted to share you guys with these numbers to show
No,
you
it's helpful.
how
Yeah.
much money we've kind of been missing out on.
Sure.
So,
All right,
Jonathan,
Oh, you got a question, Cheryl?
yeah. So, Jonathan, the state CPA distribution since FY05, that's 20 years. That's
Yeah.
20
So the
years.
Okay.
so
By
20
that, by
years-
20 years, not a lot of money.
Well, no, you know what it is, Cheryl? I should have included some of these towns haven't been on for all 20 years. Some of these have only been on 10 years or 12 years. And maybe I'll add that to the slide.
Yeah, I think that's an
you should.
important
I think you
caveat.
should.
Yeah, because
Right.
otherwise you
Because it's
divide
not-
that by 20 years. That's not a lot of money.
Right,
That's-
right.
yeah.
No,
Add to our tax rate.
that's a great point. You know what? I'll figure out a way to redo that. Some of these towns haven't been on all 20 years. Some of them have been on shorter. I know Kingston, I wish I remembered, but they no way has Kingston been on for 20 years. So some of them have been a little bit late to the game like us, so they haven't been on for all 20, but I just wanted to include, and maybe I can just take the fiscal year 05 off and just say state CPA distribution since inception or
Yeah.
something like
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
so to show
Yeah,
you
but
how
even
much.
that,
So
How long-
Jonathan,
I would just drop the column entirely because
Really?
it would just
Yeah.
be, it's a point of confusion.
yeah.
Okay.
so Jonathan, I
Yeah.
in my opinion, one of the important notes to this is somehow displaying for the community what the state contribution has been. But I think that over a 20-year basis, this, it does seem like it works against it a little bit.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
is there a way to at least, does it average out to be at least a 1-to-1 match year over year? I guess that's the question.
You don't know that, do we?
Help me explain that each.
So,
trying
so for instance, if you take Bridgewater,
Yeah.
right, their contribution for FY24 is 186,066, right?
Yep.
Did the
Yeah.
state contribution in FY24, is that going to at least match that 186,066, or is it coming in less than that?
No, EJ, that's the money that the state has given the town.
Yeah, so I think the question is the opposite way, I guess. How much has Bridgewater contributed to receive that 186?
Correct. Correct.
So
Oh,
in the
so-
early years of this, they were giving a much higher percentage too, because
Correct.
there were less towns who were doing it. So
Right.
they brought in the money and then they were giving a higher percentage to each of the
Correct.
towns.
So
So
that,
the
yeah,
match has actually gone down year after year, but
Yeah, doesn't.
it would,
worth it.
I don't know what percentage we're at this year.
so in last year's number, they're still working on this year's number. Last year's number, I believe, was 21%. So whatever money we raised as a town, the state would match 21% if it was last year. So to Sandy's point, the towns that got in early on this program made out like gangbusters because there weren't a lot of towns and they made a lot of money. But to Sandy's point, the pie is being cut in more slices now because a lot more towns are jumping onto the program.
Mm.
But it's still, I would argue, let's say worst case scenario, let's say we're 15%. You're still, I don't know too many financial programs where you're making 15% on your dollar, right? So worst case scenario, I don't want to put out 15 as like, who knows? Maybe it's even less. I'm not even sure. The state's still working on the number, but I would again argue that 15, 20% of money we put away for projects that we're going to need to do without any sort of, state ties or fine print, I think is still a worthy thing to do.
Good interest rate.
So do we know what the average distribution rate was, I guess, over like say the last 5 years? Like that might be helpful just for folks to frame it.
Yes,
in their minds.
Yeah, hold on. He sent it to me.
Like if it's like 17% or like whatever that
Right,
number
right.
is, because then it could be a good estimate for just going forward
You know
Yeah,
what?
we
I will.
shouldn't get too far into the weeds here, and it'd be really confusing.
Well, you know what? If you don't mind, guys, I know you guys have a
Yeah.
meeting to do. I'll if you want, I can circle back to it either tonight before the end of your meeting, or I will absolutely look at including that, an average percent match, to kind of give you guys an idea of what it's been. And what do you think? The last 10 years, last 5 years? What do you,
I think
the whole,
five.
the whole league?
I'd go
I think 5 is fine. Yeah,
I
5
think
'cause it's
five
more
should be
recent.
fine.
Yeah, it's more
Okay.
more
recent.
recent because there's more
Sure.
people involved.
So
Right.
I still
there are-
support I still support just going with the 2024 column. The more
Okay.
data you present, the more questions you're going to get, and the
Sure.
more unanswerable items you're going to have.
Sure.
So just say, here's what they're doing for this year. Here's the percentage that the towns are doing the surcharge. This
Yep.
does not include what they're getting from the residents. This is state contribution only. And then you're
Right.
dealing with a right now event that you don't really have to explain.
Okay.
And should they work their way back to what is the percentage we're going to get from the state, and it's going down every year? Sounds like a negative.
It
Right.
does.
And
No, that's
we
a
don't
good
want to
point,
go
Mike.
that direction at all.
Sure.
Yeah, I think it's
Jim's
fine.
got a
Yeah,
good
but
point.
That's not the right
But it-
message if we start talking
Yeah.
going negative
Yeah.
numbers.
But in
If it's
fairness,
going
guys,
up, that's one thing, but
but in
TJ, what do you
fairness,
got?
guys, the residents have a right to know the good, the bad, and the ugly about the programs, right? So I think the residents are entitled to understand what percentage of their dollar is going to be matched in a program like this if they're being asked to pay into it.
Yeah.
That's a valid point too.
So
EJ.
on that other slide, on that first slide, can you go back a couple slides, Jonathan, real quick for
Yeah,
that?
tell me when to stop.
Where we had the 238 total. Where was that
238.
actually?
Right here. Right here.
Yeah. So then could we add it maybe into here, say like based on an average only plus the expectation of maybe like whatever the dollar equivalent would be for the like percentage over the last 5 years. That way they can see like, okay, this is what you guys are going to contribute as a town, and
Yeah.
then this is what we can kind of reasonably expect the state to give us as well, right? That way they have a
Sure.
view of the full picture as to what this fund's gonna comprise of, right?
No, it makes sense. I just get a tiny bit nervous of me, I guess we could do with the average. I wouldn't be comfortable trying to forecast what the percent's going to be this year because I wouldn't want to be held to a number that isn't accurate, so I'm
Yeah.
much more comfortable going with an average than trying to, project what this coming year is going to be.
Yeah, and then maybe just a speaking point, you can say that this is just a pure guesstimate, but just based on historical averages, like we could expect something in this ballpark type of thing for
Sure.
a match.
Sure,
Because I think that will be an important thing to communicate, right? Just so people
Sure.
can understand how the dollar is going to work here, right? So
Yep. All right, are we good to jump forward a little bit?
yeah. So
All right, so we're done here. All right, so yes, it is a new tax, but it is different. So the adoption of the CPA would mean a small property tax increase for Halifax property owners, but there are some differences between CPA and standard taxes, like your funds raised receive an additional annual state contribution. We just went over that. This is big here. The community decides how the funds will be spent. That's what I love about this program. As I said, there's really no fine print. We as a town of Halifax can decide of those 4 categories where we want to spend our money.
So that was going to be actually one of my questions, actually, if I just may, is in regards to the spending of the funds. Like, is this
Yep.
going to work as a typical fund where it has to go as to town meeting as an article to use the funds, or how are we going to manage?
Todd Dargy, you hold that thought because it is coming.
Yeah, I would
Stay
think.
tuned. Stay tuned here. All right. So it also can be used as matching funds that are required by many state and federal grants. This is a big one too. The funds are dedicated to projects that are typically underfunded or unfunded. And that's a big problem here in Halifax. I'll be honest. We have great history here in town. We don't set aside any sort of funding for preservation at all. I talked with our building facilities guy and it's, Jonathan, I love our old buildings, but we don't really put much of a priority in keeping them, and you'll see some of the pictures that I've taken here. It's, I essentially feel like our history is crumbling around us. So that's a big part of it as well as some of the fields and some of the recreation areas that are in pretty rough shape. So I'm hopeful and excited that we can get this going. And then CPA facilities knowledge of and participation in proposed community projects. So in doing this, the CPA will kind of help guide us a little bit through the process. So that's an asset as well. Next slide. All right, so here we go. How can we adopt the CPA? So the easiest way is through town meeting on Monday, we vote to place the CPA on the November ballot. And that's a big distinction. If we vote for the CPA on Monday, we are not voting to activate it. It's not like we make the vote at town hall and then poof, we have CPA. We are voting to put it on the November ballot. Okay, so I would even argue, even if you're a little hesitant on the program, I think the Democratic reason, I don't want to get on my soapbox here, but even if you're not a huge fan of it, I think we should let the town decide. You know, so a yes vote at town meeting doesn't mean that it's a definite for the town of Halifax. It just means that we're agreeing to put it on the November ballot and let people decide. So if the article passes on Monday, we would need to form a CPA ballot question committee. And that is, if folks are interested in, seeing this passed, we can have a committee formed. And again, that can't be any town involvement because it's a ballot question. Town has to have minimal involvement because as technically as a town, we can't get behind, can't fully get behind yay or nay on a ballot initiative. So if residents of the town wanted to start a ballot question committee to try to promote this article or this ballot question, I guess, that is something we can do. They would have to register that with the Secretary of State to be an official ballot question committee on the books. All right. If the article does not pass on Monday, you can still do a citizen's petition to get it on the ballot. So let's say there are enough folks in town that are really passionate and want to see the CPA go through, but for one reason or another, it doesn't pass at town meeting. They still have the option of a citizen's petition. And I forget how many signatures that would need to be, but they have essentially one last step, even if it doesn't pass at town meeting. But they would also need to follow the same step for the CPA ballot question committee. All right, sorry, it's a mouthful. And then the next bullet down there, it goes to the ballot, and it would be during our presidential election, as I said, Tuesday, November 5th. If it passes, then the town is on the hook to form a community preservation committee. We would do our research, see how we want to set up our community preservation committee, and then that committee construction would be voted on the May 2025 town meeting. Mm-hmm. And they would be in charge of coming up with a community preservation plan. Each community that's part of the CPA is charged with coming up with a draft, with a document that kind of outlines the goals of the town and how they see CPA being used and adopted. So that is something that the Community Preservation Committee would begin to work on. Everybody good?
Yep.
All right. All right. So how are the funds dispersed? So we've collected our money. We have our money from the town. We have our money from the state. So we, again, as I said, we need to form a CPA committee. And the CPA committee is the one that takes in all the proposals for projects. So any resident in town that would like to see a project done, they can submit that to our Community Preservation Act committee. They collect all our proposals from our residents and they go through them. And they, let me see here. So all of the money we would be raising, a minimum of 10% of that money has to go in the three of the categories. They lump open space and recreation together. So we would have to leave 10% in historic preservation, 10% in open space recreation, 10% in affordable housing. And then that remaining 70% we can use on any project of those 3 or 4 we'd like. But as a rule, though, we can't empty the coffers on one project. We would need to leave at least 10% in each of those buckets, but then be allowed to use the 70% remaining on whatever project we like out of those buckets, if that makes sense.
Jonathan,
all right, so
the 10% is on an annualized basis, has to be added to the historic, open space, and affordable?
Correct. Correct. Okay. So who can be on the Community Preservation Committee? So as it stands now, traditionally your members on a Community Preservation Committee is 1 member of your Conservation Committee, 1 member of your Historical Commission, 1 member of your Housing Authority, 1 member of your Parks, 1 member of your Planning Board, and then up to 4 at-large members from the community it has to be at least a 5-person board. It can be no more than a 9-person board. So the state gives us some flexibility as to how big or small within range we want to make our committee. All right. So how are the funds managed and dispersed? Well, the Community Preservation Committee that we would set up takes in all the proposals like I told you about. But then once they make their recommendations, it's not a final say. They bring those recommendations to the town meeting. And we as a town meeting vote for yay or nay on the proposed project. So I don't want folks thinking, you know, who gets to make this decision? Is it 5 people in a back room somewhere, you know, making the decision on how we spend the money? That's not the case. Halifax residents control it by bringing it to town meeting, and we either vote yay or nay on what the town wants to do with our money.
So we could have
All right.
6 proposed articles for that then, or 6 proposed projects.
6 proposed. Help me out
Let's say
with
you
that.
You go to town meeting, you could have a list of 6 proposed projects and the residents get to vote on one of the 6.
Correct. Or if we have enough money for 2, we can do 2. As long as we keep, you know, as long as we keep that 10% in those 3 buckets, we could do 1 big project. We could do 3 smaller projects. We really have a lot of flexibility about how we want that money to be spent.
You wouldn't, Frank, you wouldn't bring forward projects that you could, so like you wouldn't say, here's 5 projects to pick from, we can only fund 2 of them. Whatever comes to town meeting would be, there would be available funding for all of them.
I see. Okay.
So the committee is the one that makes the recommendation, okay, let's say the committee receives 10 applications, totaling request of $1 million, and they feel that, you know, they only have 500,000 to spend, and they would recommend, if there's 5 worthy projects of 500,000, they'd recommend those projects, but they wouldn't recommend beyond what was available and then say, okay, you can only pick these ones.
Okay.
Thanks, Cody.
What, I have a question.
Okay. Go ahead, Bill.
This money cannot be used to supplement the operating budget, correct? Of the
Correct.
town?
Correct.
Yeah, can't be.
Correct. That would be nice, but no, that is not the case.
The only thing you can do with it is that through CPA, you can have an administrative budget that's approved at town meeting annually, and that can be used to fund the administrative functions of the committee. So if they had part-time support staff, that could be paid out of that administrative budget. Or if they were to do some sort of administrative study to do with CPA, then you could use that administrative budget. But if it's not related to CPA, you can't. Yeah, it wouldn't be like an operational expense you could use it for.
Right. I think the town of Bridgewater has so much CPA funding that they actually have a full-time CPA person whose job it is just to manage and oversee the CPA funds and projects. So to Cody's point, yeah, that you could use that for CPA related personnel.
So Jonathan, I have two quick questions.
Sure.
The first is when is the money awarded each year? So I'm assuming it comes in at the beginning of the fiscal year to be spent at some.
That's a great question, EJ. And I got to admit, I'm not sure when that. Cody, do you know when that is received?
I think it's November. So they do a preliminary figure. They look at the trust. They do a preliminary figure usually in November, and then toward the end of the fiscal year, when the state closes out their budget, they look at the trust again. And there's also legislation written in where if the state has a budget surplus, part of that goes toward the CPA and then is distributed toward the communities. So you get the initial amount in November.
That's
So
a great.
when you get the initial amount, do you mean that you just have awareness as to what that amount will be? Because I thought Jonathan said earlier on, we still don't know what the 24 contribution is from the state.
So
No,
fiscal 24's contribution was 21%.
Okay.
I don't anticipate it being adjusted because, you know, the market's a little slow and obviously the state budget has had some constraints. We don't know the fiscal 25 number yet. I think that's what Jonathan was referring to. We'll know that.
Okay. And then my second question is, can the funds be carried over year? So if we saw a project that was maybe 2 years down the road that we wanted to use CPA funds for, could we carry those funds for the 2 years, or do you have to use it each fiscal year?
No, you can carry over.
Okay.
You can carry over if the town wants to sit tight and hey, we don't have anything now, but we'd like to hold for a bigger project, the following year. That's also an option as well.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Yeah, no worries.
And just to be clear, that's a perpetual carryover, right? So if we want to hold on the funds for 10 years, we can do that,
Yeah.
right? There's no limitation.
I can double check, Todd, but I don't know if there's a maximum length we can hold on to it. But I will double check and get back to you guys.
Okay.
You can continue carrying it over, until there's a use for it. Like my previous community, they had CPA, and there was probably 4 or 5 years where they didn't have a housing project. So they just kept putting money aside for the housing project, and then a almost $2 million housing project came forward that they allocated the funding to.
All right, so let's get into some of the projects that we could have used CPA money for. Obviously, the big one there, the headliner there is the Hops Playground. As I said, it took me and our committee 6 years to raise enough money to rebuild our playground. So that's 6 years of kids that didn't have a town playground there. And if we had this CPA, if this program was enacted, we could have had it in a year. So that one is near and dear to my heart, obviously. Walking trail, if those of you have been around our walking trail, it's believe it or not, it was actually in worse shape than it is now. So we used money to fix that. That could have been a CPA project. We also built a Gaga ball pit, and that could have been a CPA project as well. So just projects that were, kind of done that we could have leaned on the state a little bit for. All right. So what can we do for future projects? Well, we can help with our youth athletic field renovations. As you know, we have giant fields here in Halifax that are a lot of upkeep and a lot of maintenance. So we can use that for, helping our fields get in better shape. If any of you have been to the tennis or basketball courts lately, those are looking really rough. I try to play tennis with a friend. You hit that crack and the ball doesn't come back. So that tennis, whether we do CPA or not, we really got to take a hard look at that. But again, it's a perfect prime example of a project that we could really dig into this and help make it a reality. And then, believe it or not, that walking trail, as much as we've worked on it, as you can see there in the picture, it's right back to looking really rough. So any future work we wanted to do on that is CPA eligible. All right, other thing for open space and recreation, if we wanted to, we could look at improvements over at the Halifax Town Beach to kind of clean up that area, make it more user friendly for our residents here. We could also look at land acquisition through Chapter 61A. We could exercise the town's right of first refusal. If there's a property that we as the town would like to own. I know some folks get a little nervous about development here in town. If we wanted to proactively look at purchasing a parcel of land, well, the open space CPA part, that's essentially what that's for. Historic preservation. So these are projects that could have qualified with CPA. We recently did repairs on the blacksmith shop. That could have been a CPA project. And also when we relocated the Brockton store, I know that was a while ago, but that as well could have been a project that we could have dipped into CPA funding for.
Jonathan, can I take a recommendation on these things?
Yeah, sure.
So on each of these projects where you're listing out that may have qualified,
sure.
Is it possible to add a dollar value as to what these projects actually cost the town to do?
Sure.
To kind of share I just think it gives it more impact.
Yeah, more teeth. All right. Let me write that note down. To project. Okay. Good idea. All right, and then preservation, what we can actively do. Again, we have a lot of historic buildings here in Halifax, and I'll be quite frank, they're looking rough. I sometimes feel like our history is kind of crumbling around us. So if it's something that the town wants to make a priority, this is what the CPA is for. We have some great historic buildings. We have a great, historic cemetery. We have a lot of history here. So if we don't want to lose it, we have to make it a priority, in my opinion. So that I think is one of the drivers behind this program for Halifax, in my opinion. All right, affordable housing as well. We could look at as part of this program. So I do have to update these pictures. These aren't in Halifax. You caught me unawares here. So I'm going to put some different pictures in here. But we could keep existing affordable units and prevent losing the market rate upon the resale. But we could also rehabilitate existing vacant housing as well. There's a bunch of different housing elements to this program we could look into. And I know housing can be a hot button topic here in Halifax. In talking to the CPA folks, they will admit sometimes that of the 4 buckets, this one is, depending on the community, can be the 4th bucket of the 4. But at least it's an option if it's ever something we want to look into here in Halifax. So we could convert vacant space into senior housing if we wanted to do that. But we could also develop new units with good design and positive environmental stewardship. So again, whether we want to use the housing aspect of this program or not is up to the community, but those are there if we'd like them. And again, Cody was gracious enough to help me here with some future capital plan purchases that we're looking at as in early stages of our 5-year capital plan that would be eligible. You're looking at a town hall exterior restoration, siding, gutters, etc. Everything that's about $750,000. The recreation courts, as I said, the basketball and tennis courts, that's anywhere from $350 to $500. The town needs to have an updated open space and recreation plan on the books. So to do that would be about $35,000. And then, as I said, the restoration of the blacksmith shop. That again, if any of you have been to Holidays in Halifax recently, it's not stable for folks to go inside. We were able to look peer in the door, but structurally it's not safe for folks to enter. So if we wanted to make that possible, we would have to look at doing that as well. So just some of the projects, there's a bunch, but wanted to kind of drive home what we could use. All right, so basically I put this in there for the folks at town meeting. What community preservation projects would you like to add? My homework for people, talk to folks that live in communities that are part of the plan, that are part of community preservation. Ask them, what's been going on in their communities. And I think you'll be surprised to see how much has been done in the towns around us through this program. And I hope that people educate themselves. My goal ideally is for this to pass Monday, and then people take the time between town meeting and in November to do some homework on the CPA program and just see how successful it's been essentially all around us. So that's kind of my idea with that one. All right, so how can folks help pass the CPA? If they're interested in helping pass, talk to your friends in other communities, as I said, about their CPA projects in their towns. And if you want to, you can help publicize it in advance of the presidential election on November 5th. And then after November, if it does pass, if folks are really interested in this, consider being part of the CPA committee, depending on how many at-large positions we want to have. Fill out a talent bank form and make it known that you'd like to be on that CPA committee to help select different projects. So that's essentially it. And then I will say, guys, if I don't know a ton about this, but the people at communitypreservation.org do. They're fantastic. And this website is awesome. The information that I might not have had tonight, it is absolutely on this page. So if there's a little more digging that you guys want to do, by all means have at it. It's a soup to nuts breakdown of the program. So it's really, really well done if anybody has any more questions. And I think that's it. Anybody have any questions for me?
Yeah, I have an item, Jonathan, and thank you for taking charge on this. I think it's a great idea, and we're looking forward to supporting this. The one thing I would just kind of mention is, just kind of putting myself in the seats of this town citizens, right? Is like kind of going back to that exception process. I guess maybe it might not be a bad idea to add a bullet point or some details just around like what that process entails, right? Because
Sure.
some folks may be like, yeah, I support this. However, like qualify for an exemption based on, XYZ type of thing.
Yeah.
And them understanding what that impact is to them to get out of it, right? So I think that's important to just highlight to them.
I agree. I was debating on how number heavy I wanted to be on this presentation, to Jim's point. But you're right. It probably doesn't hurt to at least have the levels of what part of this project that the state deems as low income and as low to moderate income for senior housing. That probably, outlining that exemption plan probably makes more sense.
Yeah, just more of the steps, I guess, too. Like, what's required is somebody need to fill out a form, and then does it have to be approved, and then who approves it, and what's the timeline, and that kind of thing. Just from our
they are not proactively exempted. It is much like, for those folks that remember our trash abatements or recycling abatements. You have to. It is a form that you do have to turn into to town hall, whether electronically or paper. We haven't got that far yet.
Okay, yeah, because I think that would be one of the questions that I envision people asking, right? To
Sure.
What that looks like, but that was my question, I guess, or suggestion, I guess. But anyone else, I guess, on the committee have any other thoughts or questions for Jonathan?
I think, and this is just my opinion, Jonathan, but
Sure. Go for it.
I would spend a lot of time on each slide reinforcing the point that we are not voting to tax tonight. We are voting to put it on the ballot for November.
Sure.
Because there's a big, it's going to be an interesting meeting based on what we already have in the warrant and through the budget and other areas of concern of the citizens.
Sure.
If we can stay away, we can't stay away from it, but if we can minimize the impact of saying this is going to cost you more money, which is basically what we're saying.
Sure.
But that's not what we're here to vote on tonight. We're here to vote on tonight to put it on the ballot for November.
Sure. Yeah, and that's my thing, Jim. Was like it or not like it, I don't see harm in putting it on a ballot.
Right.
Like, to me, that, I don't want to say un-American, but to me, let's give the town a chance to at least decide whether we want to do it or not. I think to stop it prematurely before it even has a chance, I don't think is very fair, in my opinion. But we'll
I would agree.
How it goes. Yeah.
I agree with Jim on that. I think that the more emphasis you can put on that point, that this is just to get it on the ballot for everyone as a community to vote on it, I think that's extremely important. The other thing is that I would mention is just kind of a formality, or I guess a little bit nitpicky, but the mention of the word tax, right? Is this officially a tax, or is this just considered a contribution?
I think the word they like to use, EJ, is a surcharge.
Okay.
It's a tax.
Take that as you like.
I'm sorry.
They don't like the T word. They don't say the T word at CPA. It's a surcharge. I don't know what you're talking about, Cheryl.
That's a tax, Jonathan, for us old people that are on fixed income.
You're going to be exempt.
It's a tax.
You're going to be exempt, Cheryl.
Oh, sure.
No, you're going to get exempted.
No, I mean, the reality of it, though, is if you take the Hops Playground, I mean, think of the amount of years that you have the committee that you know very well about for obvious reasons. But, the community year over year and month after month, there was a fundraiser that everyone had to contribute to, and if you have a fund like this set up, that minimizes the amount of work that you have to do outside of for the fundraising, right? So there's definitely a benefit. And I know for everyone, there were times where fundraisings for an effort of that size got to be a lot, right? And so this is a way for the town to be better prepared for these types of expenses down the road. So you've got to recognize that, though, and kind of think back to what the experience was to get the money that we needed to complete some of these projects that you mentioned in the presentation, which is why I said kind of putting a dollar figure on those bullets would be meaningful, because it really sheds light on how much effort went into really making those things happen. And I don't sell that short.
Yeah, I mean, the Hops Playground was $250,000, $250,000, and it took us 6 years of 5Ks and meat raffles and trivia nights, and Not
And you-
if it rhymed with hops, we did it. We did chops for hops. We did flop for hops. We did a cow plop for hops. You know, it
Yep.
was exhausting. So,
And with the program, you would have had it in 2 years tops.
oh, maybe a year to
Yeah.
2 years tops, you know? So again, like I say, by the time that playground was done, my kids were too old to play in it, you know? So it's a true story. So I don't want to say we want to have nice things, but we want to have things that are represent the town of Halifax well. We need to make it a priority, you know? And if the town wants to have a track that you can walk around and a tennis court you can play tennis on.
Yeah.
You know, reality is that's what this is for.
Right. And there's other things in the pipeline, like if the pickleball courts go into the 55 plus, right? We're going to have to maintain those. I would assume that this is something that could fund that as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's town-owned land and it's a recreation spot. Absolutely.
So one thing to know with CPA, you can't use it to maintain anything. And so you can only use, installation.
Yeah.
You can't use it to maintain anything though.
But Cody,
Well,
let's
then
say
there's the question, would it be able to be used to repair the tennis courts?
If it's a full restoration, yes, not just
a redo.
annual maintenance. So, and that's the same with like historic buildings. So you can't use it to, the annual maintenance on historic buildings. But if there's a historic building that needs a full rehab, full restoration, then it can be utilized for that.
Okay.
Project driven.
It basically goes back to they don't want you utilizing it to supplement your annual operating budget.
Sure.
Right.
Sure. All right. Any other questions for anybody? All right. I thank you guys for allowing
thank
me.
you.
We'll see you guys Monday night. And again, if you guys can think of anything in the interim between now and Monday and you have any other questions, feel free to pass it along.
Thanks,
Great.
Jonathan.
Thank you so much, Jonathan.
I'm gonna go
Appreciate
get the water out of my my room here. I don't know what the heck happened.
Good night.
Thanks. Thanks,
Good
guys.
night.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Jonathan, thank you.
All right, so that brings us to the next item on the agenda, which was the vote of the town articles. So again, just this last remaining one that Jonathan just took us through, which is Article 9 in the printed warrant. So any other discussion from anyone before we move into a vote? No? Okay, hearing none, then I guess would somebody like to make a motion to approve Article 9?
So moved.
Thank you, Michael.
Second.
Thank you, EJ. Roll call vote, Frank?
Yes on Article 9.
Thank you, Frank. Bill?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Cheryl?
I'm a little hesitant, but I will say yes, just so it gets on the ballot. So yes.
EJ?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
And I am a yes as well. Motion carries 7-0. So just make a note on that real quick. Okay. All right, great. All right, so that was that. Moving on then. So the reserve fund transfer request, Cody, we had talked about one potentially coming for the roof there, I guess. Any progress or update in regards to that? I think they were still trying to get a good quote or something like that, right? Was that the latest or?
No, they've run into some even more issues
Okay.
there, so we're still evaluating it. Apparently, the framing isn't up to code either,
Oh, geez.
so it's beyond just the plywood that needs to be replaced. We're talking maybe structure, whole new structure, roof structure. So we've had some meetings with our engineer and Scott Materna, Steve Hayward, and the contractor to figure out the best option to move forward.
Okay, so this is going to be probably a couple weeks away then. So, right, nothing imminent.
I would think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Fair enough. And so we did have a couple of line item requests on the agenda itself. It specifically states reserve fund transfer. So it sounds like those line item transfers aren't urgent, right? We can delay those until Monday.
Till
Which is-
Monday.
Yeah, it's probably the best approach just because we were too specific, I think, in the agenda. So I did talk to
Right.
Katie about this as well. Sorry, I apologize. One second.
That's right. I was just going to say, if you could hold off posting them on the meeting agenda until tomorrow. I have one more department I want to talk to make sure she's going to make it. we might need to do a line item transfer for the election registration account. So I'll let you know early in the morning. I'll send Todd, you and Katie a message whether we have to add one to it.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Thank you for that. And then, so I think what we're going to do for going forward too is just make this, I think it's good just to have a general placeholder on the budget, right? Because these kind of pop up and sometimes they're urgent. So it's good just to have it on there as a placeholder. So, but I think we just need to be more generic in our language, right? So, I think what we can do going forward, if everybody's agreeable to it, is we'll just reframe the line item to funding transfer requests, which is more generic in the sense that the funding transfer request could either be, reserve fund transfer or a line item, right? It's comprehensive of both. Any questions, concerns with moving forward with that approach?
Cody, will that work? Do they have to list them?
If it's an emergency, no. If we know about it in advance, we will let Todd, you and Katie know so we can specifically list it on the agenda. Like for Monday, we'll want to specifically list each one. And then we'll do that in the future as long as we know about it, unless it's something emergent, that came up within the 48 hours. As long as it's, line item transfers is listed, that'll cover it. It's broad enough to cover anything we didn't know about.
Okay.
And you guys all right with the way I did that form? So rather than having, 6 different ones, I did it all on one form.
Mhm.
And you just have to sign that one page. Is that okay?
I think that works. Yeah.
Yeah, good to me.
And I guess you'll bring that copy, I guess, Sandy, to the meeting
I
on
will,
Monday.
yes.
Okay. So
Yep.
people can physically sign it while we're in person.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome.
What if we don't agree with one of the items on there and it's all in one form and we're going to sign the form?
Then we take it off. We just
can-
strike through it.
We can strike it and initial it?
Absolutely.
Okay, that's acceptable?
Yeah, it's really whatever you guys vote. Whatever you guys vote, we can amend the form. I mean, if it's,
Okay.
if it's a line through it, it's just, if there's ever a question on it, we could refer back to the minutes or the meeting recording.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Anything else in regards to that to discuss? No. All right. So then just moving on, I guess, committee liaison updates. I don't know, anything from anyone to share?
How's the town accountant search going?
Not very good.
Cody,
So it's looking like we are going to transition to a consultant as the first of the year and utilize them until we can find someone to fill the role in person permanently.
okay.
So the other candidate you had in mind, or potential candidate, is no longer a potential candidate, the second person?
Yeah, we've had two committee, the applicant committee, interview committee we've interviewed several people, and we had identified 2 individuals who we thought would be, good fits for the position. Unfortunately, when we got into negotiations prior to kind of making it public to a meeting, we weren't able to, the board selectmen didn't feel comfortable offering them what they were looking for.
Yeah.
So we weren't able to reach an agreement.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. And then correspondent and as may arise. So it was brought to our attention, there was for the April 8th FinCom meeting that actually never made its way onto YouTube. There was a delay. It just got posted today. So, which was a bit of a concern, just given that meeting was review the budget line items. So I don't know how many people in the town actually, watch our meetings and such, but it was kind of like somewhat of a worst case scenario. I guess that was probably the more important one to have posted, if any, out there. So we are going to make some changes just in the oversight of that. So I don't know, Cody, is there an opportunity, I guess, to have Area 58, I guess, to confirm back as well, like when things are posted?
Yeah, I'm going to talk to Area 58. I think one of the things we need to do is have them start setting up these Zooms, and then it's their video. we're not having
Yeah.
to send it to them.
Sure, yeah,
They've offered to do it. It's just not, how we've done it in the past. Because right now what happens is we have a town Zoom account, and typically Caesar will set up the Zoom, or in this case, it's just a reoccurring one. And then he actually has to download it and then sends it on the cloud over to Area 58. Then they do their editing and then they post it. So I think it makes more sense for them to just post the Zoom meeting. And then when it's done, it's theirs. So I'm going to talk to them about that.
okay, yeah, and then as an interim or an additional check as well, I talked to Katie about this earlier, and so she'll start to just, validate that they've been posted, and I think we'll do that in conjunction with the voting of the minutes as like a good reminder. And so go to check like that next week to make sure that the video is actually posted as well. And so that'll be like a nice control check. And then like for the rest of us as well, including myself, if we can just try to be mindful and take a peek out there to see if the videos get posted. And if anybody notices one missing, certainly, raise it so we can get it addressed, sooner than possible, as soon as possible. All right. So I think that will be a good way to solve for that. So just, fortunately it was a one-off. Any questions on that at all or anything? Comments? No? Okay. Public participation is, oh, sorry, before we move on, I guess the one other thing too is I want to just make sure it's not lost because it was a relatively sensitive or is a relatively sensitive topic amongst the committee in regards to the opera funds there, Cody. Has there been any update, I guess, to that as far as the communication of the recommendation from FinCom to the selectmen and then the selectmen's decision on usage of the remaining opera funds?
Yes, so the board met and discussed it yesterday. I did pass along the message, but also Jim and Frank were actually at the meeting and were able to share the sentiments of the committee. And
Awesome.
The selectmen ended up agreeing with kind of what the committee felt, and they approved the additional funding for the fire department gear rather than the wood chipper.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you for the update. And thank you, Jim and Frank, for your participation there as well. Okay, all right, so then public participation, there was somebody on, but it looks like the person dropped, so we don't have any public participation, so I guess we can skip over that. And then next meeting planning, so obviously, it's the town meeting on Monday, 6 p.m., so we'll meet to review the line items and any other items that come up, and maybe the minutes from this meeting as well, if we're able to get the recording and the document completed by Monday. If not, we'll just vote them in the following week. So, all right. So I think that brings us to a closure for today. Would somebody like to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Cheryl. Roll call vote. Frank?
Yes, to adjourn, please.
Bill?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes to adjourn?
EJ?
Yes.
Cheryl? Cheryl?
You talking to me?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Cheryl. Michael?
Yes.
And I am a yes as well. Motion carries 7-0. Meeting is adjourned at 7:10 p.m.